Good morning. This should be the final class. We've made it. Anyway, we're talking about the future society. It's on page 243. It's a series of ifs. If, ... And they are big ifs. Here we go. If man derives all his, about the seventh line down the page on page 243. If man derives all his knowledge from the sensible world and from the experience of the sensible world, then this is to say that the empirical world should be arranged in such a way that man experiences and assimilates what is truly human, and he experiences himself as man. Okay. This is classical Fichte idealism, right? There's a certain point where the left-wing Hegelians reverted back to Fichte, and that was true also of Marx. So if your consciousness derives from the material world, change the material world in such a way that it may give rise to a better consciousness. Makes perfect sense. If enlightened, in other words, if German idealism is correct, if enlightened self-interest is the principle of all morality, this is England, this is not Germany. If enlightened self-interest is the principle of all morality, it is necessary for private interest of each man to coincide with the general interest of humanity, right? In other words, if self-interest is the basis for human action in society, which of course they might have said in both England and in France, then you got to get that coinciding with the whole vision of humanity. Good luck. If man is not free in the materialist sense, that is, if he is not negatively free to avoid this or that event, like a virus, but is positively free to express his true individuality, then rather than punishing individuals for their crimes, we should destroy the social conditions which give rise to crimes. In other words, if crime is more prevalent in the slums, get rid of the slums. Okay, another one. If man is formed by circumstances, right? It's not consciousness that determines the world, it's the world that determines consciousness. If man is formed by circumstances, these circumstances must be humanly formed. Okay. If man is by nature a social being, oh yes, right? Remember? An individual can become an individual only in a society. Okay. That's true for Marx as well as Hegel. If man is by nature a social being, if he only develops his real nature in society, and the power of his nature should be measured not by the power of private individuals, but by the power of society. Okay. Down at the bottom of that page, communism is the positive abolition of private property, of human self-alienation, and thus the real appropriation of human nature through and for the human being. Okay, we've seen, remember for Hegel, there's the negation of the negation. Excuse me. Okay, now needless to say, Well, the example that Hegel quite often uses is, remember, a crime is a negation of the law, and you negate the negation of the law, and etc. Right? Okay, well, the negation, of course, for Marx is of course alienation. Okay, and of course, what causes alienation? Private property. Private. I'll get it. So, if you want to get rid of alienation, which is a negation, do a negation of it. Get rid of the thing that causes private property, causes alienation, namely private property. Communism is the positive, right? Well, of course, needless to say, there are always positives left over when you do negations because there are no total negations, according to Hegel, and similarly with Marx. Okay, let's move right along. I'll get it. Here we go. Well, speaking of the this latter point here on page 248, right? In a genuine community, individuals gain their freedom in and through their association, right? The individual becomes an individual only in a society, and above all, through his or her labor. Okay, let's move back one page on page 247, the bottom paragraph there. The transformation of personal powers into material powers through the division of labor cannot be undone again merely by dismissing the idea of it from one's mind. Right? You know, there's some things that you can change your attitude and you change things, but not in this case, according to Marx. But only by the action of individuals who reestablish their control over these material powers and abolish the division of labor. Okay? A division of labor is part and parcel of any politico-economic system, whether feudalism or capitalism. A division of labor. Of course, they're very different divisions of labor, needless to say. This is not possible without a community, right? Okay? Only in association with others has each individual the means of cultivating his talents in all directions. His talents in all directions? Okay, this is one of the more, as I think we already mentioned, one of the more unrealistic parts of Marx. It's the humanistic part of Marx, but it's a bit, okay, for example, back on, we did this once before, back on page 97, it doesn't hurt to do it again. Develop in all directions, here we go. Whereas in a communist society, okay, where nobody has one exclusive sphere of activity, but each can become accomplished in any branch he wishes, production as a whole is regulated by the society, right? In other words, you end up being put anywhere you're needed. Thus making it possible for me to do one thing today and another tomorrow. That sounds good. To hunt in the morning, fish in the afternoon, rear cattle in the evening, criticize after dinner in accordance with my inclination, without ever becoming a hunter, fisherman, or critic. What this is pure amateurism, right? One can be a jack of all trades. That's true. That's true. You can be. For example, all you have to, you can re-electrify, no, that's not the right word. You can redo the electrical wiring in your house simply by going down to the bookstore and getting a how to be an electrician book. And there are all kinds of how-to books to do anything you like. Anyway, so you go, however, the state may have something to say about this. When you rewire your house, you're going to have it inspected, your work inspected, because either by the local engineer in the municipality, or by labor and industries. In other words, they're going to have to send out a representative to make sure that what you did is in accordance with regs, with the current regulations. And also, I mean, they don't want fires breaking out that's going to destroy your neighbor's house because you rewired the thing all wrong, right? So can you totally get rid of the state? That's going to be a question that we're going to take up very shortly. Okay, so cultivating his talents in all directions. I kind of have my doubts. Anyway, moving right along. Over on page 231. He wants to get rid of the division of labor. I think he wants to get rid of the division of labor as it is in the capitalist system, but you can push things a little bit too far. Here we go. About 2/3 of the way down the page on 251. On the other hand, it also serves as a measure of the individual's share in the common labor and of his share in that part of the total product destined for individual consumption. The social relations of the individual producers, both in their labor and in their product, are in this case perfectly simple and intelligible, and that with regard not only to production but also to distribution. In other words, even though he attempts to abolish the division of labor, he remains a social functionalist. Right? You are individuated by the social function, you have in the society. Okay, moving right along. Bottom of the page there. Modern industry never looks upon or treats the existing form of production process as final. This is true. Right? In other words, societies go through various stages of economic development. Agricultural, industrial, service, informational, okay? The technical basis of industry is therefore revolutionary. It is. He's right there. And it causes a dislocation in society every time you make a move from one to the other. I mean, for example, when all of a sudden in the Pacific Northwest, we decided to save the spotted owl and close down the logging of federal lands, right? Logging could still be done on private lands, but the federal lands are so much more extensive. It caused a dislocation in the Pacific Northwest. And what the state had to do was retrain all those loggers, right? And the people who drove the trucks and those who repaired those big, huge trucks carried the logs to the mill, etc. They had to be retrained, right? Okay. So on the other hand, it also serves the measure. The technical basis of industry is therefore revolutionary, indeed, while all earlier modes of production were essentially conservative. It's not surprising that conservatism is typical of agricultural societies. Right? The eastern part of the state of Washington is more conservative than the western part. The Midwest is, I won't pursue it. You know all that. By means of machinery, chemical processes, and other methods, well, I mean, for example, agriculture is no longer what it was in the time of my grandparents, right? It's agro-business now, right? It leads to continual changes not only in the technical basis of production, but also in the function of the laborer. Well, I mean, after all, the Industrial Revolution may have introduced introduced manufacturing on a national scale into the American economic system, but what happens when all of a sudden the computer appears on the scene? Aha! Then you're going to move into a different kind of economy. And it's going to transform some of the other, the previous economies too. The farmer, present-day farmer, uses the computer to determine how much milk the cow is producing, and therefore how much it should produce, and if it doesn't produce, it's hamburger. Okay? And similarly, the computer is used in industry as well. Okay, there was the development of machines. Okay, page 252. Page 252, middle. How it constantly threatens by taking away instruments of labor to snatch from his hands his means of subsistence, and by suppressing his particular subdivided task to make him superfluous. Okay? The use of machines, of course, in industry, replaces workers. Now you'd say, well, and Marx is going to point out, this has both a negative side, but it also has a positive side, as we'll see. It has a negative side in that the worker gets replaced by a machine. Okay? And the more serious is not mechanical type labor, but intellectual type labor, right? Because artificial intelligence not only replaces workers' minds, right? Executive minds. Okay, making him superfluous, replaced by a machine. We have seen too how this contradiction works itself out through incessant sacrifices by the working class. Okay, well, it used to be that there were International Dock Workers Union, okay, which was a very powerful union. The people who loaded and unloaded the ships that came into ports, right? All of a sudden, you have container cargo ships, right? They carry containers, and untouched by any stevedore. So the stevedores are. You only need a few to use those big cranes to lift up the container on and off the ship. Okay, so. The most reckless squandering of labor power and devastations caused by social anarchy. This is the negative side. It is a negative side, no question about it. However, it also has its positive side. When I was younger, considerably, I worked in the summer at a egg processing plant. Right? And my task during the summer was to lift the eggs from, during the summer, when the chickens lay eggs, the shells are a little on the thin side. And so you have to reinforce this, especially in warmer climates. This was in the Central Valley of California. And so my task was to lift them out of one box, right? And two at a time, had little things, and you'd put them on the rack and run them through a bath of oil. And then when they ran through, you'd take them out, put them over there. This for 8 hours a day. It was totally mind-numbing. It was at that point that I decided I'm definitely going back to college. Anyway, there is the positive side to being replaced by a machine. Well, I mean, let's face it, there are certain occupations which are simply too dangerous. And so the fact that robots replace workers in such dangerous occupations is good. It's all to the, also, it brings up something else in the worker, his versatility, right? and consequently the versatility of the worker. It becomes a question of life and death for society to adapt the mode of production to the normal functioning of this law. Okay? So large-scale industry indeed compels society under penalty of death to replace the miserable reserve army of labor which keeps capital at its disposal for its varying needs and way of expectation by complete adaptability of individuals to the changing demands of different kinds of work. Right? Marx is right there. Right? Once a particular form of labor disappears, those laborers have to look for different forms of work. I mean, for example, the restaurant industry at the moment is pretty much closing down. If it's not closed down, well, you can buy to-go at the front door of the restaurant. But that's not the way. That's not how restaurants really make their money, as anyone in the trade knows. So people who were restaurant workers are going to have to find different modes of labor during this particular time. One step already spontaneous, page 253, top paragraph. One step already spontaneously taken towards affecting this revolution is the establishment of technical and agricultural schools, right? Well, as in the 19th century, there were what were called land-grant colleges, right? Okay, there are two universities in the state of Washington, the University of Washington, and there's also Wazoo, the Washington State University, which is essentially an ag college. Well, almost every state has both, right? In other words, if you want to be trained as a vet, you go over to Wazoo. If you want to work at Boeing, you go to the University of Washington to take mechanical engineering. Right? Well, it's you might say a division of educational labor, and of course technical schools as well, what are called trade schools. Well, in Germany, at a certain point in your educational career, sometimes a little bit toward the end of what we would call middle school, you take an exam. And if you pass it, you move on the track toward the university. If you don't pass it, you're going to get shunted off. That's a little too harsh. You're going to get you're going to be advised to go to a trade school, learn a trade, right? And okay. Let's move on. So what's going to happen to the state? Was es los? What's going to happen to the state? After all, the state is an abstraction. So why not just get rid of it? Well, yeah, why not? Except we need the state to come around. When I do rewire my house, we need the state or some function of the state come around and check my work for the good of the society. So in this sense, it is possible to speak of the present-day state in contrast with the future. In other words, what is the state going to look like in the future? The present-day state is an abstraction, and it just as well should go, in which its present root, bourgeois society, will have passed away. The present state is a bourgeois state, and of course bourgeois is a dirty word for Marx. The question then arises, what changes will the state undergo in a communist society? Aha! In other words, where's the state going to go in a communist society? Well, I'll tell you ahead of time. There's going to be a withering away of the state. But it's an abstraction that's simply going to disappear like the fog when the sun comes up. So the question then arises, what changes will the state undergo in a communist society? In other words, What social functions will remain there which are analogous to the present functions of the state? Well, you're still going to have investigators investigating the work I did rewiring my house. This question can only be answered scientifically. Yeah, well. And one does not get a flea hop nearer to the problem by any number of juxtapositions of the word people with the word state, which of course some communist states, the People's Republic. It's not, Marx would see this as, that's phony, right? Even though many a People's Republic is exactly how communist states describe themselves. Between capitalist and communist society lies the period of the revolutionary transformation of the one into the other, okay? In other words, where do we want to get? Well, of course, where we want to get. We want to get to a class, that's where we want to get, according to Marx, right? There corresponds to this also a political transition period in which the states can be nothing but the revolutionary dictatorship of the proletariat. Okay, that's an interim state, right? In other words, the interim between the bourgeois state and the classless society state. Okay, so the revolutionary dictatorship of the proletariat. Okay. Now this is an interim state, or a transitional. The state that is in transition from a bourgeois state to a classless society type state. Unfortunately, many a communist country never quite got to the classless society state, and most of them fixated at this particular stage, right? In which the country was run by the party. Did the party include all members of the society? I don't think so. It's the party elite. Okay. Okay, let's get to the end of this. Let's, what do you call it? Shoot to the finish. Here we go. But these, over on page 258. But these defects are inevitable in the first phase of the communist society, as it is when it has just emerged after the prolonged birth pangs from a capitalist society, in other words, from a bourgeois society, which is to the withering away of that type of state until we get to a classless society type of state, okay? Right can never be higher than the economic structure of society and the cultural development conditioned by it. Right in the sense of Hegel's understanding of the word right, as in state. In a higher phase of communist society, when the enslaving subordination of the individual to the division of labor, and with it the antithesis between mental and physical labor, and of course that's going to be a problem because mental labor can be replaced by a machine as well as physical labor. When that has vanished, when labor is no longer merely a means of life but has become life principle need, right? Well, you do have to work because that's your identity. You have to have work. You have to work, and you have to have work. When the productive forces have also increased with the all-round development of the individual, all those ifs. Remember all those ifs. And all the springs of cooperative wealth flow more abundantly. It's sounding beautiful here. You know? Sounding great. Only then will it be possible completely to transcend the narrow outlook of bourgeois, right? And only then will society be able to inscribe on its banners, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. The statement derived from Louis Blanc, L'Organisation du Travail, in 1840. The Louis Blanc, I'd never heard of him until I looked it up. Anyway, the organization of work, L'Organisation du Travail. Okay, so from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. And of course, the question, what does that sound like to you? The monastery. From each according to his ability, right? The rules say don't give the monk more than he can handle, right? Don't give him a job he can't handle, and you know, be considerate. From each according to his ability, to each according to his need. And of course, in the rule, St. Benedict said the abbot is supposed to accommodate himself and the policies of the monastery to the individual need, or to the needs of the individual monk. So, what is Marx proposing here? From each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. He's trying to, it would almost appear as he's trying to establish a monastery in the, shall we call it the real world? That would mean the monastery is the unreal world. Well, we won't go there. Anyway, he's trying to establish a world monastery, right? Communism, community, somehow. I mean, monasteries do work, but only if you've got monks, and monks who are what do you call it? Monks who are obedient and accept a more, shall we say, poverty type life. In other words, well, we don't have families, right? Which, of course, is going to complicate things. And, of course, that's exactly why classless societies tend to be non-existent. Because yeah. Anyway, enough. I think Brother Damien wants to make an announcement.
Father George, come here. On Thursday, we'll be having our study group for the final exam. I will send out a Zoom invitation to the entire class. It will be for Thursday at 1 p.m. Please attend as much of it as you are able to. We'll have the study questions available to us today. And then on on Monday, May the 4th, the exam will open on Moodle, and you'll be able to go to Moodle and begin the exam at any time of the day, but you'll have only an hour to finish it. So I recommend that you do all of your studying in advance. Thank you.
And finally, many thanks to my teacher's assistant, Brother Damien, without whom this would not have happened.